So hi Amanda.
Hi.
So you have a new album out, but before we talk about the new album, I want to jump back quickly to Dogs because Dogs was released in 2016. I think in that time people change in those years. You're a different person than you were back then. So how do you look back at that album with the perspective from now?
Well, I try to look back at it as with some gratitude and some kindness towards myself because like what I like about that album is that I was in a way, I don't know if it comes across that way, but it was very conceptual because the way we did it was just like I wrote for 2 weeks and we recorded for 2 days.
Mm.
Everything that we recorded, I think, except for maybe one song, became that album, and then it was done. So it was like it was a special process, but so musically, I look back at it with some, you know, I'm happy for that experience. But as a person, like having written that album and then going forth 8 years in my life, of course, I feel like I'm a grown up now, a little bit more than then.
But that's an interesting thing because, well, obviously, I don't know. I don't think it was the plan to wait 8 years for another album, and obviously, you've been busy with other things.
Yeah.
Um, but did you kind of put ideas aside, or did you already throughout the years did you kind of gather ideas and things, or was it again kind of like a snapshot moment where you did all the work in a couple of weeks?
Actually, it kind of was like, to be honest, I don't know what the fuck happened with those 8 years. And I think many people can relate to that, like in
Oh
a
yeah,
certain time,
especially with COVID in between. It's
Yeah, yeah. And I think also like statistically, that's when, I'm 36 and like, becoming a parent and like everything is so much is going on in your life that's so intense. So it feels like I think I'm not the only one to say that I don't remember shit what happened. In a way. But yeah, like coming out on the other side, um, like trying to make an album. I think like even from day one after releasing the last album, I think I was in the process of making another one. Like I think that's how it is for most people.
Hmm.
Um, and who are like album artists or in that way like but it did feel all the time like I was trying and trying but I never really it was like this this letter that the spies would get in like an
Mm.
old Bond movie who just like you read the letter and it just like blows up or something. That's how I felt about this record. It felt like a joke I was telling over and over. But the fact was I didn't work with it like physically. I thought about it so much that I thought I was working with it, but I wasn't.
Mm.
I was, I have a band like also, and we were making
Sure.
records. And I think if you have like in a band, I need to consider everyone else's situation. I don't have to do that in the same way if I make my own music. So
Mm.
that tends to make the solo projects less prioritized because you can move them all the time. So
Yeah.
I think that's one of the explanations.
And what starts the process off then in a concrete way? Was there a moment where you did actually, rather than just being in your mind, you actually put some you maybe write some things down, maybe start tinkering with some equipment? What was kind of the starting point of the actual work for you?
Well, I think me and my partner who I made this album with, I think we started already in 2020.
Okay.
Um, but it was a very low intensive process. We had babies and
Mm.
things like that. But I think ultimately I got to a situation where we had done an Amazon album and I had like an open space. And then we just we thought like since the last album was very like happened in a very short time, we wanted to write a lot of songs and like pick whatever we thought was the best ones and record them. Didn't really turn out that way, but
Mm,
I think I came to a point where my dad got really sick. He passed away from lung cancer,
okay.
and I think that when he was sick, it was the exact time when we had time to work on the album. So it kind of like it started feeding
Mm,
like these different like um big things in my life, like losing a parent, and also like like making an album is also a big thing. So
sure.
they fed off each other, and like it was definitely a help for me to process what was going on in the rest of my life by doing this album. So I think that gave it some energy and some motivation for me to even try to finish it, before he passed, because he
Mm,
was involved in my life like that. I didn't finish it before he passed, but it ended up becoming something that's very related to him and the kind of relation that I got to experience by being his daughter.
mm. And I think the opening track, Wild Geese, Wild Love, is kind of directed towards that as well. Was he able to hear that song, or did you talk with him about that song?
It's strange because I don't remember if I did play it
Mm.
to not like I know he heard a couple of songs and he might have heard an early one of that, but I can't remember.
Because
But it's
writing, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, because that track actually is, I think, for me, one of the most comforting songs I've ever written for myself. Like, normally I write things to get rid of them, but
Mm.
that's a song that I find so much comfort in myself. So it's special.
I was gonna ask because I can imagine that also being very difficult to write because you're dealing with very honest and very real emotions. But as you say, it's comforting, and part of that, as a listener, it's very comforting also because the way you sound, the warmth of your voice, and the way you kind of produce this album. So, what was the aim, so to say, when the sonic kind of landscape started to take shape? What were you looking for?
Well, I think I go very much by instinct.
Okay.
So it's hard to say exactly. I mean, I'm musically, I'm a product of everything I listen to, of course. So that goes straight into the music. But I guess, like personally, I always want to, I want some depth in it. Like it can be simple, but it has to have some layers, like sonically and like the whole expression has like I wanted to like if you listen to my song you can go to certain levels. You can go to level
Mm,
one. It's gonna be, I mean, it's not difficult music in any way. Like I make quite plain pop music in a way, but I want you to be able to, if I've always been a fan myself of like the tracks in between the really good songs, because I
mm,
like diving into things. I don't want to have it like straight in my face. I like to do the work myself, at least meet the songs halfway, because that's where I feel that that you get the most out of music like that. So
sure.
I think to answer your question, I think it's a lot about that, like to be able to construct something in a way that you might not get it the first time, you might not get it the second time, but I wanted to be able to go deeper and deeper into it.
When building these songs and these stories and these layers within the songs, then did it help that you have kind of a home studio and you and your partner could kind of work on it in a kind of, as you mentioned earlier, kind of like a relaxed fashion where it wasn't pressure, you're in the studio, you're paying for it, you have to do everything in 2 weeks, but now you could let it breathe and let your mind breathe as well.
Yeah, I know. And I think that happened a lot to us, that we like, I need to be honest with you, I was stressed like hell all the time because like, why am I not able to finish this fucking album? What's happening? Like, what's so I had definitely a big bug on my shoulder all the time, but I think the process was good like that because we even if we didn't feel that way, we kind of said to ourselves all the time, like, we can't take it easy. It's gonna be
Mm.
done when it's done. But at the end of the process, what we did was again writing about six or seven songs in like 2 weeks, taking
Yeah,
them to the studio, hiring some musicians that we loved, and that became the main part of the album. So the initial idea by doing everything ourselves, like, by the computer, like
sure,
computer, that in the end, it turns out we didn't so much believe in that. And I think it wasn't just like an idea that we couldn't really fulfill. So we went back to the old school way of doing music, which is ultimately the way I believe most in that, because any creative process is driven forth by limitations, right? Because you make
sure,
certain decisions, and that drives it further. It's not like you can't really think it. You have to limit yourself. That's how you get to whatever you decide the end is. And I think the most efficient and the most uh, joyful way to do it is to pick the musicians and go to studio, because already by doing that you've come so far, because the
mm,
musicians and who you choose to play your songs, that is a big limitation in itself, because you can't they will play the songs and you can't do anything about it afterwards.
sure.
Like, that would be the fundament of everything, and I like that. It's I think that brings it helps you get a very honest and uh, healthy process.
Sure. And I mean, talking about limitations, and it's a bit weird to refer to children as limitations, but having children, the one thing I hear most from artists is that you have to compartmentalize your time very well and know when you have time to work on it and everything. How has having children kind of changed your perspective on what you do?
I think it's so strange because I don't know. I mean, maybe it's not strange because I don't know being anything other than a musician. But in this world of musicians, it's such a big thing. People think to have kids, like,
Mm,
people think it's like either you have a career in music, or you have kids. Not, it's like, and I think actually, because historically the person who we see as a musician has been like, these old grumpy guys who probably not been so functional as parents. And
sure.
I think we're not aware of how much that like sinks into our brain, not just as like listeners, but also as musicians, and our egos are fed by that picture of like, that it's not possible to be a functional parent and a musician at the same time.
Mm,
You have to choose either. And I think that has worried me a lot. And it has actually made me really, really angry at music, because it was like I didn't get the equation right. Like, how can I even make music and be a traveling musician if I want to have kids? Like, I didn't have any good examples of musicians who are good parents. Like, I've only seen historically, and also, to be honest, around me, people who kind of choose music before their kids.
sure.
And the way I was brought up, uh, I had parents who chose us before anything. So it made it really like, had so many mixed messages. Like, you're
Mm,
supposed to do all these things, that, go on tour and be very, very active with what you do, which is kind of hard to do if you're a parent. But at the same time, I had this other message, like, never, ever uh, let go of your kids for
sure.
the sake of your own ego. So to answer your question, I think I try to spread the gospel that it's very important to talk about the fact that it's, especially as a female musician, that it's a super good idea to become a parent and be a musician at the same time. Because I think it's definitely possible, and it gives you. I get the feeling sometimes that people think that they will lose their creative force. I think then if you do that, it won't have to do with your kids. Then there's something else is wrong. It's not the fact that
Right.
you're a parent, then you need to figure out something else about your creativity. I, for myself, think that becoming a parent and has given me a much better view on what I do, because honestly, now I can see it as my job if I want to, and not like something that has to do with my ego. And I think that's a better approach because it gives me more freedom, actually.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, yeah, I can imagine, and it's also perhaps part of youth when you're in your 20s, whatever you're doing at that point, you feel like that's your whole life, and that's kind of your identity and what you have to be. And then you become older, and then I mean, you have children. You also run a farm, I believe, a functioning farm. So you have these other aspects in life that you can be content with. So not everything hinges on how your music is going.
Yeah, I
I,
think for me at least that has been a must for keeping myself sane, because
hmm,
I spent my 20s to 30s being, that's when I started with music, and I actually, maybe I'm not the right person for music, but I became quite obsessed, depressed, and
hmm,
like, and I was like, how can I'm a privileged white person in a country that is like, that has all the facilities available for me to have a good life and feel good. And if I'm not feeling good because of the fact that I'm a musician, I don't like that doesn't do it for me. Then I need
hmm,
to do something else because it's like it's not worth it. Um, so I think I decided pretty quickly that either I find a way to do this so that I'm at peace with myself, or I just do something else, because I don't want to
hmm.
contribute to this like idea of uh, the suffering artist. Because when, of course, it can be hard and tough to be a musician in at many times, like, but many occupations are like that. But I think like the myth of the suffering artist is a misconception. Like, that's just
Hmm.
someone who was sick. It's like that's not artistry, or like that's not how it's supposed to be. We can't idolize a thing like that and then expect us to uh, be set an example for what it is to actually mirror yourself in a fair way, which is most of the times why we have culture
Hmm.
and music, is because we want to learn something about ourselves so that hopefully we become better versions of ourselves.
Well, that's an interesting point, because if you then take this album, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, where well, this album helped you kind of deal with grief, I suppose. It helped you deal with life, the other side of it, of the life and death, and I suppose any love and everything in between. So what have you learned, you think, from making this album?
I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, that's the magic of it all. Like, I think, um, I think, like, being creative in any way. I mean, to me, creativity doesn't have to be about music or painting. Like, it can be like an outlet, whatever you have as an outlet. Like, it's there because it can protect you from lunacy. Like, it's more
Sure.
like, so the only thing I know is making this album probably helped me and protected me in some way. And I don't want to know what would happen otherwise. But what it taught me, it feels like it's too soon to know for me.
Mm.
It's
Yeah,
like,
that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Maybe in a couple of years, or maybe in 6 months or so, you have a better view of
yeah,
what this
exactly.
album was.
I
I
think the
want to
world
delve into. Oh, sorry.
is, oh, no,
Okay.
you
And I
go.
want to delve into one other song because I just found it a very interesting song. The World is Tired of You. What
Oh
was the
yeah.
inspiration for that song?
Well, um, well, I think it's pretty complicated to be in this world, don't you
It
think?
is.
Like, I don't
It
know
is.
how to be a human and just like see everything that's happening. And like I think that's the main subject in my mind every day. Like how the fuck do we do this? And um how do I deal with the fact that there's so much tragedy and trauma going on
Yes.
everywhere? And like, you know, I can feel everything in my body pretty easily. Like I don't want to shut off. Like that feels like an even bigger tragedy if I would. So I want to be part, but at the same time, you have to be able to function. Like you can't be completely overwhelmed all the time by all uh the the hard aspects of being a human. And I think maybe at some point I spent so much time thinking about the world I live in. So I almost find it comforting to think that, not just me getting tired of the world, also maybe the world gets tired of me sometimes. And then somehow it's like, I don't know, I just find that comforting to just like because I spend so much time complaining, mentally about the state of the world, that it would just feel fair to have the state of the world getting tired of me
But
also.
I really like that perspective, and it's also kind of a reminder not to take yourself too seriously, like everything revolves around you, right?
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, no matter how much I try to think and how much I try to read about how much I try to understand, it's like kind of pointless because I'm
Sure.
only one little tiny human's perspective and I won't ever get things right, which is like, it's sometimes like when you meet all aspects of what's going on, you have this impulse and this reflex to, okay, but if I just learn about it, if I just try to understand, it's like you think almost that if you did, maybe it would go away.
Hmm.
It's like some kind of strange instinct, but what can happen is just, of course, I'm not saying that you shouldn't, try to build some understanding of
Sure.
what's going on, but it's like the worst thing that can happen is that it gets too polarized and you just go for one opinion and you can never be sure of that.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right in that. And I have that, I still struggle with it at times where I can be very cynical just reading about the world and how people treat each other. I can become very cynical, but I have to remind myself that this is also kind of what people do, and this is kind of part of the process as well. And then
Exactly.
there is, as you mentioned, a comforting feeling almost in not having to be perfect, but realizing, well, I'm not gonna figure everything out and I'm not gonna do everything right all the time. So there's a comfort in that as well, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I need to remind myself of that quite often because it's like otherwise it's quite strong that I have to try to understand. I have to try like,
Mm,
but that's I don't know. I think sometimes you want to do that because you think that you're showing empathy or compassion by doing that. But I don't know. I'm not sure if that's really,
but
I don't
that
know. It's
no, but
hard to
that's the
use.
thing. I mean, the world is so complex, and to try and figure it out, because I've tried it. I mean, everybody does, going on the internet, looking things up, reading, as you say, all that kind of stuff. And then at the end of the day, you still haven't figured it out. And even if you did, I think it's too complex for one mind to understand and even do something about it. So
Definitely
it's
so. And I think you're pointing out a very important thing because we tend to think that the world is complicated, but it's complex. And it's a big, big difference. Like complicated problems can, be solved by most of the time by thinking, and but complexity is like something completely different.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's far removed from understanding. It's
yeah,
those two don't don't really go together often.
no, no,
But
exactly.
finally then to round off the interview, because well, the last like I mentioned in the beginning of the interview, it's not like you've been doing nothing the last 8 years. Yeah, you have Amazons, you have children, you have a farm. How do you see kind of your future as an artist? And how do you see now that the album is coming out very soon, and then how do you see what comes next? Are you very ambitious still musically?
I don't know. I don't know. You know what? I don't like I have hopes and dreams. Um, but I'm very humble in a sense that I don't know what I can achieve. Like I just have to, like I think I can do a couple of more albums. I think I can do certain things, but I don't have a clue how people will react to the music. There's so many things I can't control. So
Sure.
I try to dream more than plan and see what
Well,
happens.
well, if it's any consolation, from what I've seen in the reaction to your music so far, everybody is really enjoying it, and
Glad to hear that.
yeah, and then it's one of those things because you always, well, you have the pop music. I mean, the industry is a thing as well, and I don't think you're the type of person that would go fully into the whole music industry and do that whole song and dance. So it's you have to kind of navigate that as well, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. I think I value more like, I've gone through phases in my life where I've been like so little of a human being. Like I've been, I've experienced things that I just feel like I never ever want to go back to that.
Mm.
And so I value staying sane much more these days than certain like achievements, I guess.
Yeah, or
But with
feeding your ego, like you said earlier.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, I hope that the music reaches its audience and that, that some people can make use of the music and so that I get to come and play places. But we'll
Mm.
see.
Well, at least you have a couple of dates this summer in Sweden, and I think in the fall you're coming over here to Europe. So it's
Yeah.
going to be an interesting, fun year, I suppose.
Yes, the race is on.
Perfect. Amanda, may I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.